We must be willing to get rid of the life we've planned so as to have the life that is waiting for us. Joseph Campbell. Well, hey there. Welcome to the Retirement Answer Man Show. My name is Roger Whitney. I'm your host. This is a show dedicated to helping you not just survive retirement, but to actually have the confidence to lean in and rock retirement regardless to how life has panned out. We have all had plans for our lives. I bet you have. And I'm going to bet that you have likely had a curveball thrown at you, maybe more than one. Maybe some smacked you right in the head and knocked you on your butt. It's easy to look back and think of, I had this all planned out, and fail to look forward at where we're going in the future. Regardless of what has occurred in the past, you got to let go of that at some point and just acknowledge deeply where we are right now. You do. Even if you've had everything go your way and life is just awesome in every aspect, you still have to think forward about what you want your life to become. And part of that, and Nicole and I were talking about this, is radically accepting what is. Not just intellectually, yeah, this is what it is, and talking about why it happened and everything else. Radically accepting this is my reality. Not looking at why it is this way. This is just the way that it is. And then looking forward and getting back to the business of creating a great life from this day forward. Now, I have a very small example of radical acceptance that I experienced last week. There are a lot more. I've had bigger ones than this, but this is as a use case example. Here's one. So I did a Spartan race with some good friends. It's like an obstacle course with mud and you climb walls, and we weren't competing. We were out there just trying to do our best and just having fun together. Thank you, David and Lauren, for doing that with me. And I had my GoPro with me, and so I'm filming everybody doing their obstacles, and they would grab the camera and they would film me doing, attempting to do the obstacles. And I got all this video, and I'm going to put it together so when we have a Christmas party together, which we're going to have, I'm going to have a little video of all of us at the Spartan race, which is sort of fun. So I was reviewing the Spartan race footage and said, oh my goodness, is that me? I look so much older than those two with that little bandana on my head, and I don't have really much hair. I'm like, that's what I look like? That's not the Roger in my head. I'm getting older. Look like the image I have. That can be scary as you get older. Now, this is just a small example. There are much bigger examples that I have in my life and you probably have in your life. But I've come to the understanding that this is who I am. I'm not going to alter how I'm aging. I'm going to try to live as healthy as I can within reason. I'm going to do my best to do whatever I want to do. But I acknowledged, I'm like, oh my goodness, look at me. And I had a moment where I was like, I don't want to accept that I'm getting older and that's what I look like. It's not the same guy in my head. I had a moment, but then I radically accepted, no, this is who I am. I'm proud of it. Now let's go move forward and do something great life-wise. This is going to be an ongoing battle to accept what is in a radical way. So you cannot worry about it. Oh, I wish I would have done this. Maybe I should, all the remunerations or whatever the word is that we put on these type of things. This is what is. Wasn't how I planned it, but what can I do now to move forward? That's always where we need to focus. And to focus forward, we really do have to radically accept what is, not just give it lip service and still play back what could have happened. Let's just get busy creating a great life and rocking retirement. So I wanted to share that concept of radical acceptance. It's really important, and I hope that you can master it. I'm working at it, and maybe we can do that together. With that, let's get to some listener questions. To help me answer your questions today, I'm bringing on Taylor Schulte from Define Financial. He's an advisor, a good friend. We're going to answer some of your questions. You can learn more about him at definefinancial.com. So let's bring on Taylor. Taylor Schulte, good to have you on the show. What's going on at Define Financial?
Roger, thanks for having me. Well, we just finished up our fall meeting surge with clients. So we meet with all of our clients in the month of October and try to round out all of our year-end tax planning before the holidays hit. So we just wrapped those up and now we're working on executing on all those year-end opportunities before the deadline.
Now, more importantly, we're on the same team for our annual golf trip with about, 6 other guys? 7? I don't even know how many we have coming.
Well, we have 2 foursomes, so that'd be 8 of us.
Thank you for the math. But we're on the same team, I understand. So do we have a name yet?
We don't have a team name. It could be a good poll for the audience. Let them choose.
Yeah. What should the losers, it might be, with me on it.
No.
One thing I've learned from you, because Taylor and I have known each other for a while, is he has standard operating procedures for almost everything you do in your practice and how you work with clients, which is one thing that I've learned a lot from. And so I appreciate that from you.
Yeah. I always pay attention to what it feels like being a consumer of somebody else's product or service. And, I appreciate, a good experience and I want to deliver that to our clients. And the only way to really do that when you're working with close to 100 families is having those systems and processes. So our main goal is for our clients to feel like they have a really good experience working with our firm. And we've worked really hard to put those things into place.
Yeah. Love processes. It creates the freedom to be creative and in the moment because you're not thinking about what you're going to do.
Right.
Well, let's start with Shane's question. So Shane has a question about potential future use of 72T, which is a withdrawal strategy. So I'll set this up. Shane is 43 years old. He has a current plan of record to work until he can use the rule of 55, and we'll describe what that is, and then access his 401k. But he's modeling a plan B scenario where he gets laid off in 5 to 12 years as a stress test and possibly using 72T. And he goes into a lot more detail. So he wants to know some of the ins and outs of rule of 55 and 72T. Why don't we break this up? I'll take rule of 55 and you take rule of 72T and what that is. Sound good?
Sounds fair. Okay. Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So rule of 55 is a provision in the code that allows you to draw money from a 401k plan, not an IRA, if you separate service from your company after you have turned age 55. So if you get laid off after age 55, they allow you to take money from your 401k plan from a regulatory perspective without having to pay the pre-59.5 penalty. So that's a valuable rule. So some of the wrinkles, and I've done this with clients, some of the wrinkles around using the rule of 55 is number one, your employer actually has to allow you to do that within the plan. So not every 401k plan automatically allows you to use this rule of 55. So you got to be careful and see if the plan does allow you to do that. Secondly, you have to see if the plan allows you to do it on a partial basis, because a plan could have the rule of 55 as an option, but it may force you to do the whole amount at once, whereas you want to do a certain amount a year. So when you're evaluating this strategy, you want to make sure that your plan allows what it is you intend to do, or you're going to learn the hard way if this is part of your withdrawal strategy. And for you, Shane, dude, you're 43 years old. Who knows where you're going to be working 5 years, 10 years, in this case, 17 years down the road. So you may want to consider that a little bit, but I think this is very green on the vine. So I appreciate that you're doing all of this stuff as a stress test. My only counsel to you on all of this is there are so many decisions and things you have to make and things you have to think about. The ones that aren't very ripe, just know that they're there. I wouldn't try to pre-plan too far because so much can change. So that's my thought on the rule of 55. Did I miss anything there, buddy?
I think I'll just add 2 things. One is just to make it really clear that the rule of 55 does not apply to IRA accounts. So oftentimes when we separate service, we're immediately inclined to roll that money into a traditional IRA. So just making sure we understand that if you roll it into an IRA, you cannot take advantage of the rule of 55. So if it's something you want to utilize, then don't be so quick to roll that money over. And then any distribution from the qualified plan, if you're using the rule of 55, is subject to an income tax withholding rate of 20%. So that may not be your desired tax withholding rate, but that will be the rate that's required for you. Now, if you end up owing less than that, then you'll get a refund when you file your tax return. So just a couple of things to keep in mind there.
Now let's switch to 72T, which is another mechanism for getting money out of qualified accounts without that penalty prior to 59.5. And you've had some experience with this. I actually have never done it, so I'm anxious to hear what you say.
Yeah, it's similar to the Rule of 55, where it's a way to get money out of your pre-tax accounts before age 59.5 without penalty. Of course, we have to pay our taxes, but without penalty. And I guess really quick, one thing I want to say about Shane here in thinking ahead is, I think we have to be careful not to plan too far ahead and start to lose sleep over these what if scenarios. I also do think that knowledge is power, and understanding what options we have available to us and what these nuances are is an important part of our planning journey here. So we don't want to obsess over all these little details of things that may or may not happen, but I do think it's important to understand what is available to us, because having that knowledge is powerful. So 72T, basically it just says that, hey, if you want to access this money early before age 59.5, you can do it, but you have to follow this very specific set of rules. So you, the account owner, you must take at least 5 substantially equal periodic payments from the traditional IRA. So you have to take these 5 substantially equal periodic payments. So you can't take $10,000 out one year and $12,000 out another. You have to follow this method that the IRS provides to you. There's 3 different methods that you can choose from to calculate these 5 equal periodic payments. And you have to follow the rules really closely to do this. You must adhere to this payment schedule for 5 years or until you reach age 59.5, whichever comes later. So you set this up, you agree to these rules, this 5 substantially equal periodic payments. Again, there's 3 methods you can choose from. Very easy to Google to find out what those 3 methods are. And then the really important thing here is that a lot of us have large traditional IRAs that we've, accumulated over our working years. You may not want to tap into the entire traditional IRA and set up these 5 equal payments. You might only want to carve out a percentage of your total pre-tax money. So the first step is to consider how much of this pot of money you truly want to use for 72Ts, and then take that amount and put it in its own separate traditional IRA. Because if we do anything to disrupt the rules associated with the 72T, you're going to blow the whole thing up, and you'll have a 10% penalty on all of the distributions that you've taken per those rules. So you have $1 million in a traditional IRA. You only want to use $500,000 of it for 72T distributions. Take that $500,000 and move it into its own traditional IRA. Follow those rules, follow the method that you choose to withdraw that money, and then don't add or withdraw anything more from that account. Because if you do, it will cause those distributions to be penalized. So don't add money to it. Don't withdraw extra money from it. And most importantly, if you work with a financial advisor who charges a percentage fee and debits it from your account, do not let them debit any fees from that traditional IRA account. So I hope it's clear that we want to be really, really careful with these 72Ts. If we do follow through with it, separate account, don't add, withdraw money from it, don't debit fees from it. Just follow those rules for 5 years.
And the key to that is it's not a decision, it's a journey on something like this, right?
Yeah.
It's not a one-time date where you're going to go out. You are getting married to this for whatever the time period is.
Yep, you're committed.
And it's easy to forget about all those other things that you have to do after you actually put this into place.
Correct.
Awesome. Well, thanks for helping on that. Now let's go to Jay and a question. I believe it's around family offices.
Roger, I have been a listener for about 7 years. My wife and I are ending our first year in retirement. We have been with a fiduciary financial planner for about 7 years as well. And we like them and trust them and think they're doing a good job. Our planner charges a 1% fee for the first 1 million invested and decreases with additional millions. Our planner has created a family office for high net worth investors. They're suggesting that I have my taxes done in the family office for no additional fee. My fees for my tax preparer have risen over the years and risen even more recently. Are there any pitfalls I should look out for by having my taxes done by my investment firm? And is there an average fee for fiduciary financial planners of high net worth? Thank you, and I'll look forward to listening for the answer.
Is there a normal fee for a fiduciary advisor? That's a big question. So we'll talk about that. You do mention, Jay, this concept of a family office. So I think it would be helpful. Let's describe what that is. A family office is essentially a business to run the finances of a high net worth individual. You have such wealth that you're basically running your own business, and a family office would have a CEO, a CFO, a chief investment officer, accounting personnel, insurance experts to run the business of managing the family wealth. That's essentially what a family office is. Generally, those are like the Rockefellers, the billionaires of the world. It has come downstream where there are multi-family offices. I know people that have their office where they're, rather than just do it for one family, they're doing it for 5 or 6. But that term has gotten a little diluted in what really a family office is. So that's the framework. So your question is, one is, what are the pitfalls of having the taxes done within the family office? For me, the first pitfall is and there was a trend to having taxes and even legal work in some states, all with it done by one firm. One thing I have found as a pitfall with that model is there's less creative tension because they all work for the same firm. The firm has its business goals. And even if every provider, let's say the CPA and the financial advisor, even if they're of high integrity, et cetera, there's a natural dilution of the tension of calling each other out and poking around at good opportunities. And I see that being lost to some extent when everything is being happened. And the other potential pitfall is it's much harder to get divorced. What happens if you like these 3 pieces of the pie, but you don't like that piece of the pie? You sort of have all or nothing from a structural standpoint. And if you get rid of one piece of pie, you may have to recreate everything else if you get rid of one of the people that are providing you in this family office. One of the best experiences I've had in the alternate where you have separate professionals collaborating together. I remember working with a client, when we were going through the 2008 recession, had a lot of commercial real estate. And so there were some asset protection worries and other things related to real estate. And we had the CPA coming up with strategies, the attorney proposing a strategy, and then I was acting a little bit as quarterback. And I remember very clearly the attorney proposing a strategy that I really didn't like. I'm like, okay, this is turning yourself into a pretzel for something that might happen, but man, there's a lot of pitfalls here. And I was able to just easily counsel my opinion to poke and question and prod on what the attorney was proposing. The client ended up doing the strategy against my objections, but it created a more robust discussion. So those are some of the pitfalls I would think of. Do you have any that you can think of?
I think you brought up some really good points. We love collaborating with CPAs and other professionals and putting our heads together and challenging each other. To your point, adding a tax practice to an existing wealth management firm is certainly a burden on that firm. It's not an easy task to all of a sudden say, we're going to do tax returns for all of our clients. So I would personally want to know, how many accountants do they have on staff? How have they structured this business? What steps have they taken to ensure that this new service model, this new service that they're offering isn't going to cause the other services that you're receiving to diminish? So again, doing taxes for a lot of people, even if it's a small number of people, it requires more infrastructure, more systems, more processes, more people. So I would really want to understand how they have added that to their firm. It is really challenging to find good CPAs to work with. So I understand the appeal of wanting to maybe do it in-house. For us, that's the biggest challenge, is helping clients find really good CPAs that communicate well, that know what they're talking about, and can follow through on the action items that we need them to follow through on. And sometimes it can be frustrating, so frustrating that we say, why don't we just do this ourselves? So I do understand that the rationale and the reason for this firm wanting to do it, but we want to make sure that they have their ducks in a row and they're doing it the right way. And it really is going to end up being a better service for you altogether.
Yeah, in my practice, it is. It's so hard to find, especially in the retirement space, because CPAs and taxes are not geared towards retirement thinking or decumulation thinking. I end up in my practice, I'm guessing this is you too. I end up doing all of my own tax estimates, but making sure all of them are approved by the client CPA to just make sure the regulatory part is done. So I would be careful about that. I like to have flexibility and I like to have some creative tension. It creates better collaboration. Now let's get to what is a quote unquote normal fee for a fiduciary. And there are very strong opinions about this everywhere. The traditional way of doing it is charging on assets under management, or some people do net worth, and then having that percentage lower as the assets get higher. Starting at 1% is actually below average. It can go down very quickly within that structure. Now, we're not going to debate what structure is right or wrong. There really isn't a right or wrong. The key is for you to make sure that you feel like you're getting the value for what they're actually doing and defining that in some material way so you can benchmark that okay, I'm still getting value from this. It's not just simply a social relationship, which a lot of these can devolve into. Do you have any comments on average fee?
Yeah, there's some research out there. Our good friend Michael Kitces has published some research saying that for fee-only wealth management firms, the median fee, a percentage fee, is about 1% on $1 million. And then, of course, it starts to go down from there. So median fee on $1 million is 1%. Median fee on $3 million is 0.85%. And then median fee, believe it or not, doesn't decrease too much more. At $5 million, it's 0.78%. So if you want to know what the average is or what the median is across the board for fee-only wealth management firms, there is some research out there that we can point you to. The FPA, the CFP board has done some research as well. But I think you bring up a good point. It really depends on the services that you're receiving and how you value those services. There are services out there like Vanguard's PAS program that charges, 0.2% or 0.3%. But those advisors that are working with the clients, they're working with thousands of clients, right? They're not working with 80 or 100. So you're one of 1,000, different families. You're also receiving, very light financial planning help and mostly investment management help. So we're not comparing apples to apples here if we're looking at Vanguard's percentage fee versus a full service fee only wealth management firm that's maybe also doing your taxes. So we have to take those services into consideration, the value, again, that you're receiving, and everyone values those services differently. The credentials of the people that you're working with, the experience, all those things certainly factor into that fee. But it's important for you to understand what that fee is, how much you're paying, and if you're truly getting, enough out of it to justify what that fee is.
Yeah, and I think these are just adult conversations, right? Of transparency and reviewing it consistently to make sure it's a win-win for both parties. And everybody's going to define their win-win differently. I was talking to someone who actually reached out to me the other day, Taylor, that had very substantial net worth and had a huge liquidity event and had a family office. And this was maybe 4 months ago, actually. I had a different conversation the other day, but this is like when I was in Colorado. And they were looking for someone to hire just to oversee all the players that they were dealing with. Because all the players had their own interest because they wanted the money to manage and so forth. So he wanted somebody that was only his advocate and watching the implementers. And I think a good advisor, whether it's a family office, is finances are a lot of what it is, but really it's a decision-making partner and a project manager that's as disconnected from how much they actually manage, and things in a long-term basis can help you feel comfortable. But I think it's the thinking partner and project manager is where the real value becomes.
Yeah. I think it's important to take some ownership here again and look at it through your own lens. We can apply this fee conversation to really any service, any industry, any profession. It might sound crazy to my neighbor that I spend, $100 per month on my gardener when he knows there's somebody cheaper who can do it for $50 or he can do it himself. But I value that service. I value that person maybe differently than my neighbor might. So I think it's really important to take ownership, know what you're receiving, know how much you're paying, and for you to determine whether that value outweighs the fee or not.
All right, let's get on to our next question. And this is from KC on pre-funding the first 5 years of retirement.
Hi, Roger. While I'm a years-long listener to your Retirement Answer Man podcast and a founding member of your Rock Retirement Club, I'm having trouble figuring out how to fund our first 5 years of retirement. When we retire in the next 14 to 15 months, I'll be 68, my wife 71. Our savings are more than 15 times our current gross earnings, and the breakdown is 33% taxable, 55% deferred, 12% Roth. our savings are 42 times our minimum dignity value. At age 70, our social capital will be 104% of our minimum dignity value. Using the 4% withdrawal guideline, we should replace 100% of our current gross earnings in retirement. Our question is, how should we plan to fund our first 5 years knowing that 1, she will have to start RMDs in year 2 of retirement, and 2, I will have to start them in year 4 of our retirement. I think funding the first 5 years is a sound principle. I just can't figure out how to apply it knowing we'll have to deal with RMDs during the initial 5-year period. Before we meet with our financial advisor and our accountant, we'd appreciate your insight. Many thanks in advance, Roger. Look forward to your response.
Okay, see, I'm excited that you're in the club because on the 22nd is the refreshed retirement masterclass, which is going to, one of the things that we fleshed out in that is creating that pie cake and that income floor and thinking about it more strategically in the optimization phase. So you'll be able to take advantage of that. From what I heard, and Taylor, you correct me if I'm wrong, and I love the detailed questions, is that their minimum dignity floor, and that's a concept that comes from the Retirement and IRA show, is funded by their social capital, their Social Security and other sources. So the 5-year income floor is already covered by social capital for the most part. That's what I heard. Is that what you heard too, Taylor?
Yep, I did.
And so you might not have to build much of a 5-year income floor except for parts that aren't covered. So from a process standpoint, this is in the resilience stage of a process. And one thing you're going to do there, and you did this if you did the original masterclass, which will still be there, is you're going to build out a 5 to 10 year cash flow estimate to determine what the deficit is that isn't covered by these other sources, meaning you got to get it from your money. And that's going to tell you the amount that you need to fund, whether it's 5 years or 10 years. Now, your question was, how do I figure out where I actually get the money from? Part of that is going to be tax planning of, do you have opportunities to fill up tax brackets by taking out of pre-tax assets? RMDs, which you mentioned for you and your wife, you do want to factor that, hey, I'm going to have these RMDs whether I like it or not. And those will become part of that income floor. So using the template that we had in Module 9 in the original masterclass, it will frame it so you can make some of these decisions. But in reality, KC, once you do that, you're just going to have to get down to a judgment call. And that judgment call just needs to be thought through in an organized way, starting with how much is it going to be? The fact that you have these RMDs, that's going to have to be part of it because you're going to have to do them anyway. And then what other sources can you pull from that make the most sense from a tax standpoint on a multi-year basis? That's my thoughts. I don't know if you have any, Taylor.
Well, I think the question really brings up something important for everybody to pay attention to. And then I'll provide my thoughts on for Casey directly. But, Casey and his wife being 68 and 71 here and knowing the RMDs around the corner, I can kind of already sense they're feeling a little bit trapped here because they know these required distributions are on the horizon, which limits the strategy that they can commit to for withdrawing money in retirement. Proactive tax planning is so important, and it can start as early as, in your 50s, starting to think ahead. Okay, what is my current tax situation today? What is my tax situation going to be at age 72 and beyond? And what can I do in between now and then to manage my taxes and manage my savings appropriately so I don't have a giant tax problem in retirement? And I've got a nice plan in place knowing that those RMDs are around the corner. So the earlier we can start planning for those required distributions and the earlier we can start planning just for taxes in general, the better. So RMDs are most certainly going to create less flexibility in retirement when withdrawing money. There's not much you can do there. They are required. The rules might change here soon. They might extend the RMD ages out a little bit, but nonetheless, the RMDs are going to create less flexibility in terms of where am I going to pull money from because you're already forced to take money from those accounts. So there's really only, a couple things you could do to combat that. One is, with what little time you have left, maybe convert some of that money into a Roth to mitigate those RMDs. If you're charitably inclined, you can also partake in charitable giving to help reduce the taxes on those RMDs. But more than anything, and I know there's different methods for attacking withdrawals in retirement. More than anything, for me personally, I think cash management becomes really important. And so there are 3 cash management rules that we follow when we go to withdraw money from our accounts in retirement. One is we want to make sure we have that emergency fund in place. So 6 months of living expenses in that emergency fund, out of sight, out of mind. Next is having 1 year of living expenses in cash. So we'll have a full 1 year of living expenses in cash. As we spend that down each month or each quarter, then we will replenish that from our different investment accounts, depending on what's most tax efficient. And then we want to have the third bucket, which is our projected tax bill for next April. So we never want to be caught off guard come next April. We have a giant tax bill to pay that we didn't plan for and build up cash for. And maybe we're forced to sell investments at an inopportune time. So we want to be proactive with our cash so we're not caught off guard. It might feel like you're holding more cash than necessary, but I think it's really important, especially when we're going through times like we are right now, where every asset class is down. And maybe you don't want to sell investments to fund some extra income. You have that extra cash on the sidelines that you can pull from while you kind of weather this storm. So just a few things to think about that I think about in terms of withdrawing money in retirement and paying attention to taxes at the same time.
You make a great point about the pre-planning. And in this case, it's difficult because you're so close. I'm 55 and I know you're younger than me. You remind me all the time. And I'm already doing pre-planning because we don't think about the distribution phase and having that flexibility. All right, let's go to another question from Belinda, who has a question about retirement and life insurance.
My name is Belinda. I'm from Oklahoma, and I have a question regarding life insurance. My husband and I just recently retired, and we have 2 large life insurance policies. They are term policies. Should we let them go as our children are all grown, or should we keep them to benefit the kids after we are gone?
So Belinda is getting ready to retire and they have some term life insurance and they want to know whether they should keep it or not. Thoughts on that, Taylor? Or you want me to take this one?
Yeah, great question. I mean, this is something really important to think about. Those who have been proactive in their financial planning often do have term insurance policies that lead into retirement. And the question becomes, should we keep these policies or not? So Belinda mentioned she's got 2 large life insurance policies. And the question is, should we let them go? Now, the other part of her question was, should we keep them so that maybe our children can benefit from these policies? If the goal in keeping these policies is legacy planning, i.e., when I pass away, this money, can be inherited by our children, then we probably wouldn't want to use term policies because the big question mark in life is we don't know how long we're going to live. And so term policies have that end date. And if it's not in existence, well, then your children aren't going to get any money. So if leaving money to your children through life insurance is truly important to you, then you would want to be looking at a permanent life insurance policy. Now, they're very expensive and we don't often recommend them. But if that's truly the goal, legacy planning, then we'd want to think about permanent insurance and not term insurance. When it comes to term insurance, we want to use term insurance for things that you mentioned. Retirement, is it fully funded? If so, probably don't need term insurance. Is there any other debt in existence? Do you have a mortgage? If not, probably don't need term insurance. The last thing I'll say is, because to me, the textbook answer here is probably don't need term insurance at this point unless you do have debt or you've got other funding to do for retirement. But the textbook answer is to get rid of your term insurance that you probably don't need it. However, I always like to remind listeners of my podcast that there's always this textbook answer and then there's your answer. And if for some reason, for any personal reason whatsoever, it just feels better to keep these policies until their end date, go for it. As long as it's not going to make or break, or if it's not going to break your retirement plan or put your retirement in jeopardy, I would support that. So textbook answer, probably don't need it, but your answer might be different. I think that's important to pay attention to.
The framework I use, and I'm actually dealing with this right now because I have some term insurance that's coming due where the guaranteed payment is going up, right? The guarantee is gone, is I would stress test your plan of record and see what happens without the insurance if one of you dies today. Because you're going to have some things change. You're going to have your tax bracket change. You're going to have Social Security income flows change. And so a good stress test to see if you need insurance is to say, well, what happens if one of us dies? How do we continue on knowing the tax brackets and we're going to lose a lot of Social Security? That is a good way of seeing how resilient your plan is in terms of needing the insurance.
Mm-hmm.
And then you know whether you need insurance, or at least you have a better feel for it. Then if you do need insurance, then you start to go down the decision tree of, well, what's the best insurance to have? And how long do I need it? Do I convert this term? Do I buy another set of, term to get me through to when I don't need it? It is a decision point from a standpoint of the kids are gone, you're set. Just do that stress test, and that will give you a lot more color as to your decision on whether you actually need it or not.
Yeah, it's not a fun stress test at all. I always tell clients, grab a glass of wine, sit down and play out those scenarios, right? If something were to happen to your spouse, what would that mean to you financially? Would that mean that you would need to go back to work? If so, then you might need to maintain some term life insurance. So I think it's a great exercise to go through. It's not a fun one. It's a morbid one, but it's really, really important to have that conversation.
Yeah. I don't know why those things don't bother me, but we forget about the tax brackets and the fact Social Security goes away. And spending may go down, but not by half, right? Because you still need all the base stuff of housing and clothing and utilities and all that.
Yeah. And just one thing, this doesn't apply to Belinda's question, but something to think about it. If those are in the working world are faced with this question, I oftentimes hear from people who are both working, both spouses are working, say, well, if my husband or wife passed away, I'd be okay because I still have a high paying job and I can, support our mortgage and support our kids and whatever. You have to think about, and again, morbid conversation here, morbid thing to play out. But if your spouse is gone and you're grieving, are you truly going to be going back to work at full speed, right? Are you truly going to be going and earning that income that you're earning right now if your spouse passes away? I mean, that's a terrible event to go through. So, be realistic with what that's actually going to be like in real life if that were to happen.
I'll use myself as an example right now, Taylor, is that we have this property in Colorado. We're going to go on this journey of building this house. And we've been in the position where we really don't need life insurance. But for the next 2 to 4 years, I'm calculating, well, we might need it during this transition because we're leaning forward a little bit financially to go through a transition. So I might end up having to buy term insurance for 3 to 5 years just to get me through that gap where I feel like, ooh, if I pass away quickly, I'm the sole breadwinner. A lot goes away really quickly, and all these things, all this complication is going to be there. So it might even be a seasonal thing. And it ain't going to be cheap at 55, as healthy as I am.
I was just going to ask you, do they give term insurance to 55-year-olds?
That is not very funny. That is not very funny. Now, I want to add on to this insurance chat. What if it's permanent insurance? I think there's an opportunity if you had permanent insurance, and this might not be your case, Belinda, but now you have a couple different wrinkles you can look at of possibly you could surrender it. You could possibly use some of the features to draw money in a tax-free way by taking loans. Or you could also look at repurposing it and perhaps moving it to permanent life insurance that has some long-term care benefit. Then you'll still have to go through some underwriting, but it might not be as extensive as if you did normal long-term care underwriting. So if you have permanent insurance, you have a couple different wrinkles that you can think about that are less insurance-based and perhaps able to make your plan more resilient on a healthcare shock basis. Lots to think about, man. That's why you got to have a process. And you have a great one. I try to have a great one. All right. Thanks, Taylor, for hanging out. We'll have a link to your podcast in our 6-Shot Saturday. Anything you want to add before we head off and set a smart sprint?
No, thanks for having me. I always enjoy it. And Roger, please work on your golf game in between now and next week.
Yes, sir. I'm on it.
On your marks, get set.
And we're off to take a little baby step we can take in the next 7 days. It's not just rock retirement, but rock life. All right. In the next 7 days, you know where we're going. What is one thing in your life that you just need to accept and close the door on what could have been, what should have been, what you had planned? You just accept, this is where I'm at. I challenge you to do that this week. Maybe it's you retired with a bear market. This is where it's at. Yeah, maybe you could have retired earlier. Put all those thoughts away. Pick one thing this week and radically accept it and make an agreement with yourself that you're going to start looking forward, not backwards. In early December, my daughter and I are doing a Spartan race in Los Angeles. We haven't had a father-daughter trip in a while, and she's a little intimidated by it. I am too. It's going to be great, though. And I'm bringing my GoPro, and I'm going to love how I look and the fact that I'm hanging out with my daughter. I'm not going to worry about how I look. I'm not going to worry about anything. I'm going to be present and enjoy the experience with my daughter. Hope you have a great week, and we will talk next Wednesday. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance reference is historical and does not guarantee future results. All indices are unmanaged and cannot be invested in directly. Make sure you consult your legal, tax, or financial advisor before making any decisions.